So the first thing you want to do is make your new composition and set the size to 1080 by 1080, so that should give you a square canvas like this. The reason we use a square is just because that's best suited to Instagram, Facebook, everything like that. So the first thing we're going to do once you've got your composition is make a new solid that will give us our background layer. So if you right click on your layer panel here and then click new solid, and then that will give you a colour selection. If you want to change your colour, just click on there and then click OK, and you can see that fills our background. I'm then going to hit enter with the layer selected, and that will let us change the name. I'm just going to call that background. Then we're going to make some text, so just select the text tool up here, drag where you want it to be, and I'm going to type in awesome. Then just select off of that, and I'm going to make a new text box, and I'm going to type in text. For this effect we do need them to be separate, so you won't be able to type them in the same text box. Then I'm just going to line those up into the middle where I want them to be. What I'm going to do, I'm going to press Control Alt Home on my keyboard, and you can see these two dots snapped into the middle. These are the anchor points, so this is where everything will scale and move from. So if I set those to the middle, then I can actually go into my Align panel down the side here, and if I select that, that will just set them both to the exact middle of the screen where we want them. Then I do actually need to move the anchor point, so we're going to select each text shape, press Y on your keyboard, and then you can drag that thing down, so we want that to be right on the bottom of the text. I'm going to do that for each one. You'll see why in a moment. So what we're going to do next is we're going to select both text layers again. We're going to go to about 15 frames, it's just over half a second. With the layer selected, if you press P on your keyboard, that will bring up the position keys here. So if you click the stopwatch with each selected, you can see there it's given us a key on each one. So that now tells it this is where these text layers need to be at 15 frames. So now I'm going to go to frame 0 right at the start, select both layers again, and I'm just going to drag them up off the screen. So now they fall down. So we've told it off the screen at frame 0, middle of the screen at frame 15, and the computer will animate between them. That looks a bit naff, so we're going to add a few things to it. So one of the things we're going to do is make the text actually bounce up, like it's hit something and bounced up on it. So easiest way to do that is we'll go to frame 25, or I might just say 1 second, and we're going to copy each of these frames. So if you select them one at a time, Control C, Control V, and that will paste the frame there. Annoyingly, you do have to do them one at a time, or it will copy the whole layer. So then in between these two frames, I'm now going to select each one, and I'm just going to go up a couple of times on the text, just using the arrow keys. And you can see that that's auto keyed it. So once you put the first frame in, After Effects will just auto key everything for you. So you can see now if we play it, drops down, bounces up. That might be a little bit quick on the bounce, so we're going to maybe make that about 7 frames between each one. A lot of it is just tweaking to get the timings right. There we go, that's nicer timing there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to change the spacing on this. Actually no, first of all, we are going to make it drop off screen. So have it bounce in, maybe hold for about a second, second and a half, so you've got time to read it. So we'll just copy each of these frames across again, so that's just telling it to hold that position, and then we will have it around 3 seconds drop off the screen again. So just move that down. I'm using my arrow keys, you can use the mouse as well, it doesn't really matter. And now we can see that drops off after a while. So drops in, bounces, have a bit of a hold so people can read it, drop off. So now what we're going to do here, which is something that does make probably the biggest difference to animation, is change the spacing between the frames. And that's how quickly it will move, not how quickly it will move between the frames, but how the speed is spread out across. So we're going to select all our frames, press F9 on your keyboard, and you can see that changes it to this diamond shape. And that's called an easy ease in After Effects. So we can see now, rather than be one linear speed across, it actually slows in and out of each movement. It looks better, but it doesn't look quite like something would if it was dropping down. That's not how gravity works. So we're going to select all of our frames again. We're going to click this button here called Graph Editor. Click that there and it will show us this. You want to make sure you're on speed graph, not value graph, speed graph. And then you can see here this actually plots the speed over time. So this can be a little bit confusing to new users, but essentially what you want to do is grab this handle here, drag it in that way, then grab this one, and grab it in that way. So you've got this kind of steady slope going to a sharp drop. And what that tells the program is that we want the speed to steadily increase and then stop very suddenly as if it's just hit the ground. Then as it bounces up, we want that to have this kind of shape to it. I'll just zoom in slightly there. If you hit this button here, it will focus on the frames you've got selected. So we want to actually push that one in from both sides as it bounces up, and then this one we want it to drop back down to the ground, so a similar shape to the first one, but obviously quite a lot smaller. Drag that in a little bit more. So you should have something that looks like that. And then if we watch that, you can see there it looks more like it's hitting a hard surface and bouncing off of it. So if we zoom out, we do then need to do the same thing to these ones here. So if you select these, click that focus button there, it will drag it into these. And now because it's dropping away, we want it to just slowly pick up speed as it drops. So we want to have the same shape as it did when it dropped in the first time. It drops off. So here's what we've got so far. You can use this to zoom out there. So it'll put you very zoomed in when you're looking at the graph editor. Drops, bounces, holds, drops away with some nice acceleration. Then what we're going to do to kind of add a little bit more dynamic effect to it is grab our awesome text on the top, on the bottom of the layer, and just drag this so it's actually offset by a couple of frames behind it. So then when you play it, it looks like that, and it looks like it's bouncing off the other one. That looks pretty good if you ask me. And then it drops off as well, so that looks like the text word is holding up the awesome word and it drops behind, and it's a little bit cartoony in its timing. So what we're going to do next is we're going to add some nifty lines onto the top. So if you grab your rectangle tool, drag it out. This can be any colour you want, but I've just chosen a nice white. And you can see again, it puts the anchor point down here, which isn't what we want it. So with the shape selected, we're going to press Ctrl, Alt, Home, and that snaps it into the middle. And then we're going to use the Align again to make sure it's centered. So we want to go to the frame where the word awesome goes through it, just the one after, so there. And then with the layer selected, if you press S on your keyboard, it'll bring up scale, and we're going to key it right there. Then you need to unclick this little paperclip chain link looking thing, and that turns off the constraints, so it means you can stretch it one way or the other without it scaling the other way. So we're going to take this one here, and moving back in time to before the word text even appears, we are going to put that there. We're going to put that to 0, and the line's gone. So what you can see actually there is it's just scaling into itself and disappearing. So we want it to scale there till awesome comes through, and then we're actually going to scale it back down to 0. So we're just going to copy the frame, Control C, Control V, and it will paste it where we've got the marker. So now we can see it does that. And then we want the same thing to happen underneath before the text drops away. So the easiest way to do that is just to copy the layer. So select the layer, Control D on your keyboard will give you the exact same shape. And this time we're going to move forward to just before the text drops down. And if you press U on your keyboard, that will show all the frames. I'm going to drag this layer forward in time to just before where we want it to appear. And then we can drag it down to where we want it. Because there's no position keys on this, we can move it wherever we like without affecting the animation. So you can see there, it appears, and then the words drop through it. It disappears again. So here's what we've got so far. So we're going to select these keys for both of the rectangles, press F9 again for easy ease, and that will just put a little bit of nicer spacing on it, so it just looks a bit smoother. But what we want to happen is we want the text to be invisible when it's above or below these lines. So what we need to do is create a mask. So I'm going to select both of my text layers, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go to pre-compose, click on that, and we'll call this text. So what this will do is it will add both the text layers to their own composition, which is essentially kind of like a group but for video files. Click OK, so you can see there they've snapped shut into this little video folder, and then if we open that, all our animation is still there, but it means it's separate to what's on here, and now they're treated as one object. So by pre-composing it means we can add a mask to both layers. So what we want to do is go to one of the lines at full width, select the new text composition, and then select a rectangle tool. And now if you try and draw a shape over a composition, it will treat it as a mask, which will actually block things out. So what we want to do is we want to draw a rectangle from the line and draw it upwards, like that. That is doing it backwards. So what we want to do is select the mask type and change it to subtract. And now we can see there that before the text comes out of that rectangle, it's invisible. So it looks like it drops out from behind the line. And then we need to do the same when it disappears, but the other way around. So we are going to select the rectangle tool again and draw a shape underneath the line. We need to go all the way to the bottom of the screen or it will reappear when it gets to the other end. And then again we need to change that to subtract. So we can see now, if I hit play, now we're getting somewhere. So we're going to add one more very simple effect, which just kind of gives it all a little bit more of a pop. So I'm going to need a new composition. So I'm going to go into my projects panel here, right click, new composition, and I'll call this one master comp because it's going to be the final one. Enter. Then we can drag in the first composition, which I shouldn't have called comp 1, you should probably call it something better. Drag this onto here, and now our main comp is here. And it plays through like normal. And again, if you click in there, all your layers are still there, they haven't disappeared. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this layer by pressing Ctrl D. It'll give us two versions. And then we'll turn the top one off for a second, just click the little eye there to hide it. Then with the bottom layer selected, we're going to go into our effects panel, which should be at the side. If it's not at the side, you just need to go into Window, and then Effects and Presets, and that will bring it up at the side for you. So I'm going to type in invert, and grab the invert effect here, and I'm going to drag it over onto the layer. And what that will do is invert the colours, so we can see what was blue and orange is now orange and blue, and the white bar has changed to black. So we're going to turn our top layer back on, and that will hide it. And we're going to use another mask to temporarily reveal the layer behind. So we want it to happen just about when the word awesome hits the word text. I think that's when it will look best. So you're going to select your top composition in the regular colours. We're going to change to a circle, the ellipse tool. And then rather than draw it on manually, the easiest way to do it is if you just double click on this layer, make sure you've got the video layer selected, then double click on the circle tool and it will put one in perfectly sized for us. And that, you can see there, that's acting as a mask. So we're going to drop down the mask menu there, then we are going to key the mask expansion, so we're going to put it up a little bit bigger so it goes all the way out of the screen, and we're going to key it there. Then we're going to go back in time a little bit, probably about there, we'll move things later, and then I'm actually going to drag the mask expansion all the way in so that the shape actually disappears. So you can see there that's actually doing the opposite of what we want because we want the original colours to be showing. So we're just going to click invert here and that will change it back to normal. So now what happens is you can see the circle expands from the middle and changes all the colours. Now what we're going to do to get a cool kind of ripple effect is we're going to select the mask, Ctrl D to duplicate it, U to show all the frames, and then we're going to offset those ever so slightly. Now what we need to do there, because we can see that's not working, is we actually need to change these to subtract and turn inverted off. So we can see there, Get a big circle. That one needs to be add, that's why. So we get the big circle and then it goes back to regular inside, so we get like a ring ripple kind of effect. Now let's just watch that through. That looks pretty good to me. We're going to select these frames, F9 for easy ease because it makes everything look better. There we go, and then it drops off. So I'm going to go to the end of the animation, on the timeline, press N on your keyboard, and then that will loop it for us. I think we need to move those a little bit later, maybe make them a bit slower. A lot of this is just testing it as you do it and seeing what looks good for you. So I think that's a little bit fast, you might disagree. Yep, I think that looks pretty awesome to me. Fantastic. So that's how you make the simple text. I'll show you how to export it as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to save this composition, Control S on your keyboard. Then if you've also got Adobe Media Encoder installed, we're going to open that up. Media Encoder loading. So Media Encoder is opened up. So we need to locate our After Effects save in the side banner down here. So when you found your After Effects file, double click on it, and you can see that actually brings up all the compositions that we had in the After Effects scene. This is why it's important to name them properly. So we've got Master Comp there, which is our final one. I'm going to drag that into the window there, and then we can see there it's dropped there, and this is where we can set our render settings. So for a fairly small compressed MP4 file, which will be supported on most social media sites or anything of the such, we want H.264, that's perfect. Match source, high bitrate. That means it will take the resolution from our After Effects composition, which is 1080 by 1080. And then click on this and we can choose the name and where we want it to save. So I'm going to call that Awesome Text. And we can see that it's .mp4. Then just hit the play button up here and that will start exporting it down here. And that is all you need to do to make some simple dynamic looking text, and you can change that text to whatever you like. You can play around with some of the effects and make sure it looks best for you. So this is the end of the tutorial. If there's anything else that you would want to see or that you want to know how to do, feel free to leave a comment, ask any questions. If something's not working for you, I'm more than happy to try and troubleshoot for you. Hope you've really enjoyed this tutorial and I look forward to doing another one. Thank you very much.